The 2001 World Rally Championship saw a very close contest between 4 drivers that went down to the final round at the Rally of Great Britain, even though the entire rally was based in Wales. These 4 drivers being Colin McRae, who was looking to win his second World Rally title and his first with Ford, Tommi Makinen, who was looking to become the first ever driver to win 5 world titles, Richard Burns, who was not only looking to become the second British driver to win the title, but also the second ever Subaru driver to win it as well, and Carlos Sainz Senior, who was looking to put the demons of 1998 behind him and win his 3rd world title, although he would need a miracle given he was 9 points behind the championship leader, which doesn't sound a lot, but back in 2001 this was the point system that they were using. The rally would end up being a nightmare for 3 of the title contenders, with Tommi Makinen retiring early on stage 2 after clipping a hole on the inside of a left-hander, which in turn ripped off his front left wheel. Carlos Sainz withdrew from the rally after stage 11 after sliding off the road and taking out 13 spectators, to which thankfully none were seriously injured, and Colin McRae would end his hopes of winning the title on stage 4 after mishearing a pace note from Nicky Griss, which saw him cut the inside of a right-hander and launch his car into the air, writing the car off in the process. This in turn led to Richard Burns, who despite winning only 1 rally, to come through to win his one and only World Rally title, becoming the second British driver to do so and the second Subaru driver to win it as well, in what would turn out to be his final season with Subaru, as he would sadly not be given the chance to return to them in 2004 due to a tumour in his head, which he would sadly succumb to in late 2005. Although it was an amazing moment, Burnsy wouldn't have won the title had it not been for 2 major factors. One being the crash that Colin McRae had on stage 4, as had Colin took the corner normally, he more than likely would have won the title, given he was leading the standings going into the finale, and the fact that he was showing amazing pace in the first 3 stages. The other factor, which is what we are going to talk about in this video, involved a decision which Mitsubishi made that not only would cost them the world title, but would end up being the start of their downfall. This is the story of Tommi Makinen's lost world title. After Tommi Makinen captured his first World Rally title in dominant fashion in 1996, WRC would introduce a new set of regulations from 1997 that would outlaw the Group A regulations that were in commission for over 10 years, following the demise of the dangerous Group B regulations, which in turn cancelled the introduction of the Group S regulations that were meant to be introduced in 1987. The regulations would be simply known as the World Rally Car Regulations, which allowed for a lot more freedom with the aerodynamics, engine and suspension, and meant that provided the car was based on a standard road car, they didn't need to make an homologation special like they did with Group A. Despite this though, Mitsubishi, thanks to dispensation from the FIA, continued with the Group A spec Lancer, provided they made modifications to the car in order to be on a level playing field with the other manufacturers who opted to go with the new WRC regulations. This would see Tommi have a challenge on his hands for both 1997 and 1998, but despite this, he would still come out on top, beating Subaru's Colin McRae by just 1 point in 1997, and then beating Toyota's Carlos Sainz by 2 points in 1998 after Carlos infamously broke down towards the end of the final stage, preventing him from snatching the title from Tommi after the thing crashed out on day 1. Tommi would win the title more comfortably in 1999, equaling fellow compatriot Juha Kankkunen's record of 4 world titles, before losing the title to another fellow compatriot Marcus Gronholm at the turn of the millennium after a frustrating season. 2001, however, showed signs of promise, as Tommi would take 3 wins at Monte Carlo, Portugal and Kenya to put himself level with Colin McRae in the Drivers' Championship, following a frustrating couple of rallies at his home rally of Finland and New Zealand. Nevertheless, Tommi was still optimistic, and with the pace of his Mitsubishi still looking strong, Tommi was determined to win a record 5th World Rally title. However, his team Rally Art, along with Mitsubishi, would make a crucial decision for the last 4 rallies that would ultimately cost Tommi any chance of winning the title. Before the start of Rally San Remo in Italy, Mitsubishi revealed a brand new car that they would use for the final 4 rallies of the 2001 season after holding back on its launch for a long time. The new car would look drastically different compared to the previous car, as it would utilise the World Rally Car regulations as opposed to the modified Group A regulations that they used since 1997. Despite it still being named a Lancer, the car was heavily based on the Sedia, but the name of the car would be the less of their concerns. With how close the championship was, Mitsubishi thought that by introducing this car for the final 4 rounds, it would give Tommi a chance to win his 5th world title, as with the freedom the WRC regulations had compared to the Group A regulations, it was thought in theory that the car would be faster than the old one. However, it turned out to be the opposite, with the car even being plagued with teething issues. On stage 1, Tommi would suffer from transmission issues, which was caused by an electrical problem, and this in turn would make the car very difficult to drive. These problems would persist for the entirety of day 1, and led to Tommi finishing the day down in a dismal 14th. The team would eventually fix the issues for day 2, but despite this, the car was still way off the pace, with Tommi even claiming that had he had the old car, he would have been much faster. Tommi would finish the day down in 11th, over 3 3/4 minutes behind rally leader Gilles Panizzi, and 20 seconds behind Colin McRae, who was down in 10th after he too suffered from transmission issues. With 2 stages to go on the final day, Makinen would retire from the rally after taking too much speed at a right-hander, clipping the outside bank and losing his front left wheel in the process. No points scored in San Remo, but with Colin McRae also having a bad rally, it meant that Tommi was still level with Colin in the standings. But the next rally at Corsica in France would not fare any better, as his Mitsubishi was still way off the pace, being nearly a second a kilometre slower on the first stage compared to stage winner Gilles Panizzi, with Tommi blaming the lack of pace on the handling of the car. Slight changes would improve this, and Tommi would start to feel more comfortable in the car, but he was still off the pace compared to the leaders. Then on stage 5, Tommi's rally would come to an end in a dramatic way. Over halfway into the long 27.64km stage, Tommi would clip a wall on the inside, bouncing the car towards a rock face and flipping the car on its roof. The car would luckily come to a rest just before going down a huge cliff, but whilst Tommi was able to get out of the car, his co-driver Risto Manisemaki was trapped inside and was struggling to get out. The stage was stopped whilst Tommi, along with spectators, stage personnel and medical personnel, tried to free Risto from the wreckage. The car had to be dragged slightly from the rear by a Land Rover Defender in order to get Risto out, as there was a fear that any slight movement in trying to get Risto out would result in the car falling down the cliff. Risto would eventually be retrieved from the wreckage and airlifted to hospital, but the crash would leave him with a broken back, putting an end to his co-driving career, although he would make one more appearance in 2003, co-driving Juuso Paikalisto in a privateer Peugeot 206. Although the crash put an end to his rally, Tommi would once again get bailed out in the championship, as Colin McRae would have yet another disastrous rally, finishing down in 11th, ensuring that Tommi would still be level with Colin at the penultimate round, but they now had Richard Burns and Carlos Sainz breathing down on them. In Australia, Tommi would finally grab his first points in the new car, but it would only be 1 point, as he finished down in 6th due to huge amounts of understeer with the car, along with stalling issues when coming out of certain hairpins, and the fact that his substitute co-driver Timo Hantonen was losing his bearings with the pace notes, given he found the lingo too complicated, as a result of him only competing in Finnish championships that use simpler pace notes compared to WRC. It also didn't help either that Tommi was suffering from some back pain as a direct result of a cracked vertebra that he sustained from the crash at Corsica. And due to the bumpy nature of Australia, Tommi would find the entire rally very uncomfortable. but his bravery persisted him throughout the event, and he was able to grab the final points place as a result after a close battle with the Subaru of Petter Solberg. But despite his commendable effort, he would lose a bit of ground to Colin McRae in the standings, but not by much, as Colin would only finish a place ahead of him in 5th, leading Tommi in the standings by just 1 point. But with Richard Burns gaining a huge amount of points on both of them in the standings, it meant that the top 3 going into the finale were only separated by just 2 points, with Carlos Sainz having an outside hope in 4th. And as we know, thanks to clipping an inside hole, Tommi would end up retiring from the finale on stage 4, ending any hope he had on winning a record at the time 5th world title. Mitsubishi had done tests with the new Lancer before the Rally of Great Britain began to ensure their car was up to speed, but with Tommi crashing out on stage 2, we will never know if the car would have been quick enough to challenge for the win. Although given the pace the Lancer showed the following season in 2002, it suggests to me at least that it likely wouldn't have been the case. So one has to ask, why did they change the car in the first place? Well, it was very clear that even between 1997 and 1999, the WRC regulations had more of an advantage compared to the modified Group A regulations that Mitsubishi was running, and this would prove to be the case when Tommi lost the title convincingly in 2000 to the Peugeot of Marcus Grönholm. Although the car was still competitive between 1997 and 2001, it would have more than likely had gotten to a point where had they continued with the car for many years afterwards, they would have more than likely in time been left behind by their rivals, and so needed to build a WRC spec car at some point in order to not fall behind. But it was very clear in 2001 that the Group A spec car was still competitive, as proven by the fact that Tommi won 3 rallies that year that put him in contention for the title. But in the final 4 rallies, Mitsubishi introduced their WRC spec car in the hopes that they would have a shot in performance in trying to help Tommi win his 5th world title. But it would end up doing the opposite, and the car, even by Tommi's admission, would end up being slower than the modified Group A car that they used for most of the season. But why was the car very uncompetitive, especially when on paper it should have been much quicker than their previous car, given what the other manufacturers were able to do with the WRC regulations? Well, it came down to a couple of factors. One simply being that the car was rushed in development. With the frustrating rounds Tommi had at both Finland and New Zealand, Mitsubishi feared that the title was slipping from their grasp, and knew they had to do something to get their championship aspirations back on track. But by releasing the new car early, rather than waiting until next year to launch it, it meant it was largely untested, and this became apparent when the car suffered from a lot of teething trouble, whether that was down to gearbox issues, engine issues, handling issues, or even the car stalling when coming out of hairpin corners. But the main reason why the car was uncompetitive was simply because of a lack of money. During this time, Ralliart, the team that ran the Mitsubishis, was starting to run into financial difficulties, not helped by the financial losses Mitsubishi would have during that time as a result of poor management within the higher ranks of the Japanese manufacturer. The lack of funding meant that not enough resources were put into the development of the new car, and as such, it meant that the car was way behind its competitors, and would be made worse when title sponsor Marlboro would end their partnership with them at the end of 2002, moving over to Peugeot from 2003. The lack of a major title sponsor pretty much put the nail in the coffin for Ralliart and Mitsubishi in WRC, with the team running a part-time schedule in 2003 to get themselves ready for a full return in 2004 before pulling the plug on the whole program at the end of 2005. But even with the financial issues Mitsubishi and Ralliart were suffering, could they have still got one more title before things started to fall apart in 2002? Personally, and as you might have guessed with the title of this video, I do believe so. Had Mitsubishi stuck with the modified Group A car for the final 4 rounds of the season and delayed the launch of the new WRC spec car for the start of 2002, I believe Tommi would have won his 5th world title, given by his admission he would have more than likely have been quicker at San Remo with the Group A car than what he was with the WRC spec car, and I think the same would have been applied with France and definitely Australia, as Tommi was usually very quick around there, especially with the Group A car. And given the pace he was showing towards the end of that rally with the WRC spec car, and also with a broken vertebra, I think he could have challenged for the win. But unfortunately, we will never know, and the switch to the WRC spec car effectively put the nail in the coffin for Tommi's time at Mitsubishi, as even before the new car was launched, he was already assessing his options for 2002, which was also another reason why Mitsubishi launched the new car early. Mitsubishi were hoping that with the new car, it would persuade Tommi to stay with the team, but with how uncompetitive the car turned out to be, Tommi's mind was already set, and on the 15th of October 2001, 4 days before Rally Corsica, it was announced that Tommi would be leaving Mitsubishi at the end of the season to join arch-rival Subaru from 2002, replacing the Peugeot-bound Richard Burns. Tommi would spend 2 years with Subaru, in which he would only achieve one more win, which came at the 2002 Rally Monte Carlo, where he assumed the win on a technicality after Sebastian Loeb was handed a 2-minute time penalty due to an illegal tyre change his Citroën team made during the second day of the rally. Tommi would retire from WRC at the end of 2003, leaving behind an amazing legacy in the sport. After rallying, he would go on to form his own rally team known as Tommi Makinen Racing, and it would be his team that would bring Toyota back to the World Rally Championship in 2017 with the Yaris. The team would go on to win the title in 2019 with Ott Tanak, and would win the title again in the pandemic-affected 2020 season with Sebastian Ogier. Tommi would end up selling the team to Toyota Gazoo Racing Europe before the start of the 2021 season, and the rest, as they say, is history. Tommi is the only person in WRC history to have won the championship as a driver and team owner, but his legacy would have been even greater had he won that 5th world title in 2001. Like with a lot of things, it remains a big what if in motorsport history.